So, the first movie review on my channel is actually going to be a Marvel movie? I didn't see that coming. Hi everybody, it's Zach here. Welcome back to Clapperboard, where I'll be doing my first movie review. So here I'll be reviewing Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is a Marvel science fiction superhero movie starring Benedict Cumberbatch, Tilda Swinton, Mads Mikkelson, Rachel McAdams, and it's directed by Scott Derrickson. So I honestly never expected to do this as my first movie review because Marvel, I'm going to be honest with you guys, Marvel has really never been my thing. I've seen a couple of clips of the Avengers Age of Ultron, I've seen a couple of those sorts of trailers, but really, I've always looked at them as being those Hollywood blockbusters that I'll never really get into, because they've never really been my type of thing. You know, I'm not exactly the biggest action person, not the biggest special effects person. With that being said, Doctor Strange was a surprisingly solid and actually really well-made movie. So, I was pleasantly surprised seeing how the movie actually turned out, because it turned out way better than I expected. I mean, it had good reviews and stuff, but I didn't actually expect to enjoy it. So I was overall very, very, very happy with how this movie turned out. The movie follows Doctor Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who is a successful, well-lived, quite rich doctor, who gets in a car accident and it severely damages his hands. And then he hears of somebody who lives in Kathmandu, Nepal, who could actually help him heal his hands and allow him to return to his job again. So, therefore, he goes to Kathmandu to see if he can meet this person. This is Tilda Swinton's character, the Ancient One, who is unknowingly a sorceress. And she teaches him her powers and how to defend the planet from other beings from other dimensions who want to take over Earth. So I'll start off with what I thought was one of the strongest bits, and that was the acting. The acting in this film is really good. I thought that Benedict Cumberbatch was a fantastic choice for Doctor Strange. Benedict Cumberbatch, I will admit, he's never really made the biggest impression on me. I've seen him in the Hobbit movies as Smaug and such, but aside from that, I've never really seen him in live-action movies. I mean, I've seen him in interviews and such, but this is the first live-action movie I've properly seen him, you know, act in when he's not in motion capture, and his performance is very, very strong. I enjoyed seeing him act out this character in a very solemn way, but also with a lot of added humor in it. And then you have the other characters, like Tilda Swinton's character, the Ancient One, who's again, very solemn, and she does add in welcome humor, but it's sort of more serious humor. And then you've got the other characters, who sort of come off as more of side characters, but definitely add in their own sort of little storylines and such. And it definitely does add, a sort of expanded universe to the film. You then have the villains, who I'm pretty sure he's the main villain is the guy who played Lashif in Casino Royale. I'm pretty sure that was him. I may be mistaken, but he did a pretty good job with his role. The chemistry between the characters. The chemistry was very good between the characters. I thought that Doctor Strange and his sort of girlfriend, I couldn't actually tell which. I couldn't tell if they were girlfriend or sort of just friends. Those two characters, Benedict Cumberbatch and Rachel McAdams, they both had very strong chemistry, particularly in a moment after Benedict Cumberbatch is in his car accident and his hands are damaged and he's sort of in a very stressed, very sort of sad position, and he loses his temper with her and he's yelling and such. And it sort of took me aback as going like, wow, I did not expect this type of thing to happen so earlier in the film, because it really does show that their characters have a bit of a rocky relationship, particularly at this point in time, but they do sort of resolve it later, and it leads to one of the most poignant moments of the film. The villains of the film, actually the villains did come off as a bit one-dimensional, particularly the sidekicks, the minions, I suppose you would call them. I don't even think they got any proper lines in their actual, screen time, which is a bit of a shame, but, you know, they may come back for a sequel if they're gonna make a sequel, so, I really don't know. Then you have sort of the comic relief characters, played by Benedict Wong, who plays the character of Wong, who's the librarian of the sorcery area, and he added some welcome humor by featuring, I'm pretty sure it was Beyonce, as some sort of gags when he's listening to headphones, using that for Doctor Strange to sort of steal books and stuff, which leads to one of my favourite parts of the movie was the humour, which was surprising because I sort of expected it to be one of those movies that took itself very seriously, but the humour came up so many times, and there were so many people in the theatres, including me, that were chuckling along to this, because it was actually a pretty funny film. The direction from Scott Derrickson, I thought that Derrickson, for the most part, did a great job building the world, building the characters, building the chemistry between each character, and sort of building the sorcery and keeping it very grounded and at the same time very over the top. I think that the director did a great job handling that. While it may not be the best direction I've ever seen, it's certainly some of the best direction I've seen this year in cinema. Speaking of which, there are actually a lot of moments in the film which were surprisingly intense. I expected this movie to sort of be those types of movies where you go, the characters are going to be okay, they're going to be fine, you know, no one's going to die. But you know, no spoilers guys, but characters do die, characters are in danger. There's actually a surprising amount of stabbing in this film, a lot of stabbing, a lot of danger. And there were a lot of moments where I thought, like, how are they going to get out of this? How are they going to solve this? And, you know, it was actually, very, like I said before, very well directed on Scott Derrickson's part. There is a moment in the film when Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, is in his car and he's checking a load of sort of scans, because of course he's a doctor and he's looking at sort of these scans for an injured person, and I'm just going, look at the road, you stupid idiot! And then of course the car crashes. There's not a lot of, it's not particularly graphic, but it's very intense, but especially since he's looking at his phone and stuff and he is completely distracted. Then we have the action. The movie, for the most part, does have some very entertaining action, very well choreographed. For the most part, it's very well filmed, but it leads into one of my biggest problems of the movie, which is the camera work. For the most part, the camera work is actually okay, but there is a lot of moments where the camera work in the action scenes is very wobbly. It's not shaky cam. It's not like shaky camera work where they're shaking the camera up. It's like all very wobbly, very close cuts. Like when somebody punches, they cut to another shot, and then they have a very close shot up here, and then they'll go to a completely different angle, and then they'll cut again. And it's a very sort of problematic sort of style of filming. It's not as bad as the sort of shaky cam that you get in the first Hunger Games movie, but it's still not the best way of filming action, but still, the action sequences are actually very well filmed. There is another problem I do have with the movie, though, and that is the PG-13 violence. This is a Marvel film, obviously they're going to pander to teenagers and kids, so of course it's PG-13. There is a moment where, I won't tell you who it is, but very early on in the film, there is a guy who gets his head cut off, and they cut away from it at the last second, but you can see his shadow of his head getting lopped off. There's no blood seen at all. There are several moments of main characters who get stabbed in this movie, stabbed in the stomach, and there's no blood soaking through their clothes at all, and I'm just going, come on, really? But for the most part, there is actually a fair amount of gore in it. You can see moments where they're trying to stitch up wounds and that sort of stuff. Something that I haven't seen in a good deal of movies lately, so it was a nice change and a bit of a gory feel to it. The special effects. From a technical standpoint, the special effects in this movie are very, very good. The CGI is great. It reminded me of the sort of very science fiction-y, very sort of high-tech sort of effects. The type of stuff you get in The Matrix, Insurgent, Inception, those types of films that add very similar effects to that. Particularly the mirror dimension, which is when they can use their sorcery to sort of affect stuff, but not affect it in the real world. And the mirror dimension is sort of like a really shimmery glass sort of effect. And then you have moments which is very reminiscent to Inception. You know in Inception how the city would sort of fold up and sort of curve over like a breaking wave. They had very similar effects to that. Whole cities would fold over, buildings would bend around, streets would fold over one another. It was so complex and so over the top that you just couldn't help but love every moment of it. And the effects, for the most part, are convincing. There are moments where the green screen becomes quite obvious, but for the most part, these effects are actually very top of the line and very convincing, and I really did enjoy watching them. One of the best parts of the movie, though, is when one of the main characters is dying, and they sort of go into these sort of ghost versions of themselves where they can sort of escape their real bodies and float in these sort of ghost, in this sort of ghost dimension in the real world, while everything freezes around them. And there's a moment where a character is dying, and Benedict Cumberbatch's character is talking with this character, and it's a very poignant scene. It's a very sort of poignant scene where they talk about their motives, and they talk about what they were trying to do, and they were talking about overall the very themes of the film. I don't suppose you could call... I don't think you should call it exposition, because it really isn't, but there wasn't, like, tears or anything, or there wasn't crying or anything like that, but it just came out as a very poignant, very sweet scene, and when the character does die, you do feel some genuine emotion and genuine sadness in it as well. But, as a whole, Doctor Strange is a very strong and very well-directed movie. It has definitely introduced me to a whole new variety of movies. I definitely think I'm going to be watching more Marvel movies, because here, the acting was exceptional, the story was pretty good, the effects were great, the action was pretty entertaining, and while it was a bit problematic, those poignant scenes with a load of character growth really did make up for it. So as a whole, if you're a fan of Marvel movie, if you're a fan of action, or just an interesting story, I would definitely recommend this movie as a whole. So guys, thank you so much for watching my review. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, as your opinions really mean a lot to me. I'll hopefully see you in another video very soon. Until then though, take care.
What's this, my mantra?
It's the Wi-Fi password. We're not savages.